Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to the second GFM Talks of the academic year. I'm delighted to be introducing this afternoon a colleague from the mathematics team who is drawing on some of their own research for the topic of this talk. Courtney Southam is presenting today on learner-generated questions, a topic I know is of interest to many colleagues across the GFM. You will have noticed that we have recorded our talk this afternoon rather than present live. This is because, and Courtney will not thank me for sharing this, but like many colleagues, he's not been very well recently, and whilst he was still really keen to share his learning this afternoon, he was not keen to have his face on screen. So I'm afraid we're going to have to manage with the soothing tones of Courtney's voice and imagine his famous smile.
Thank you very much for joining this GFM talk that explores the relationship between the nature of learner-generated examples and pupils' learning outcomes in the secondary classroom. Please feel free to email me at any time with any questions or comments that you may have regarding this presentation. I'll be more than happy to share the research paper that accompanies it. I conducted this inquiry as part of the first year of my master's course in Learning and Teaching at the University of Oxford. Whilst my research task focuses on my personal experience within the mathematics classroom, I would like to invite you to think creatively about how this can link to your own classroom practice and get in touch with any ideas that this may provoke you to explore in your learning environment. I would like to begin by defining the key terms within this presentation. Any references to example can be broadly defined as anything from which a learner may generalise, and learner-generated example alludes to those examples offered by pupils. This is often where they're wishing to seek clarification or validation of their understanding or to acquire a new understanding. It is also important to define what is meant by these terms. A concept definition is a form of words used to specify a concept, and a concept image consists of all the cognitive structure in an individual's mind that is associated with a given concept. Learner-generated examples are extremely interesting. Dahlberg and Hausman discuss how a student's explanation of their understanding of the concept definition can give a glimpse of the student's concept image. This work was what a significant proportion of my research and intervention was built upon. Teaching in coastal secondary schools, and indeed coastal regions, we find there are a number of challenges that we face. Some of these were identified by the Future Leaders Trust in 2015, explored in their report, Combating Isolation, Why Coastal Schools Are Failing and How Head Teachers Are Turning Them Around. These include, but are not limited to, geographical, economic and cultural factors, declining industry, limited transport infrastructure, low-paid work and few opportunities. And so I wanted to think carefully about how I as a teacher could develop strategies to improve this situation. Some of the most relevant findings of this report stated that schools reported that for student outcomes to improve, it is not enough for students to attend and behave. They need to be engaged, and that student behaviour was improved through positive measures, such as involving them in leadership, giving them additional responsibilities, and promoting good role models. In my role as a teacher researcher, I've explored a range of different pedagogical techniques, and through the wide breadth of research I've engaged with, I've been encouraged to experiment with task design and how this can be carefully considered to shift the responsibility of learning onto the pupils in my classroom. I think it's important to provide learners with skills that can complement their academic abilities that will benefit them as they develop as members of the wider community. This is currently a key focus within the GFM, with the introduction of a community curriculum that aims to connect learners with their local communities and realise the opportunities available to them, which was also identified as a great way to combat the isolation in coastal schools in this report. It is also instrumental in ensuring that learners embody, develop and secure the following 8 skills and abilities: listening, speaking, problem solving, creativity, staying positive, aiming high, leadership and teamwork, which we all know and recognise as Gosport futures. Although, despite the findings of this report, conducted more than 5 years ago, I have found my own experience of practitioner styles to mostly align with the behaviourist pedagogical approach, where a mixture of lecturing, modelling and demonstration, rote learning and core repetition can be seen in the classroom. All of these activities are visible and structured, as well as being led by the teacher. In my experience, this approach reduces visible engagement and excludes learners from taking ownership of their learning journey and subsequently their outcomes. I've been interested to investigate the influence that this has upon learner independence and resilience in mathematics, and also the impact that encouraging a learner to take responsibility for their learning can have upon their learning outcomes. In mathematics, there are clear links with the skill of problem solving. However, I feel the ability to problem solve can be heavily influenced by the other skills or qualities mentioned. Skills such as an individual's creativity could be likely to affect their success in problem solving, and therefore in the context of the mathematics classroom, their learning outcomes. For example, learners are known to find the topic of fractions difficult, and so capitalising on their skills of creativity, by encouraging them to generate their own examples, we may help to advance their understandings. In my department, in recent years there has been a shift in teaching style to deliver a mastery curriculum, prioritising depth of understanding over a breadth of knowledge. As a part of this, a pupil's involvement and responsibility in their learning journey must be considered as a vital contributing factor to their outcome. One method of increasing learner involvement and accountability within this experience would be to provide more opportunities in lessons for learner-generated examples to be generated and shared, which in turn would allow learners to explore the boundaries of their concept images and for their peers to be exposed to a wider range of concept definitions. This focus on learners' ideas has the potential to remove barriers to learning created by explanations only delivered by teachers that can often neglect consideration of learner perspective or adopt language unfamiliar to learners, which without careful planning can limit access to learning. Through the review of available literature that researches the relationship between the nature of learner-generated examples and pupils' learning outcomes, the following research questions were established. What different dimensions of change can learners explore when generating examples? How does what a learner vary relate to their learning outcome? And what are the implications of these findings on teaching practice? The focus of this investigation is on learners' experiences. This interests me as I believe if a practitioner can understand the experience of learners, then they will be better equipped to appreciate learner perception. This could then be used to design tasks that are mindful of these experiences, with the aims of tasks being to improve engagement, reduce cognitive load, and promote the skill of independence. The investigation featured 64 Year 7 learners of varying ability who were studying fractions, decimals, and percentages. The choice to select this specific group of learners was partly due to their reduced exposure to the learning in a secondary mathematics classroom compared with other year groups. This is because they had only just transitioned from primary school. This is in addition to the fact that the majority of their first year at secondary school being experienced virtually due to the complications of the COVID-19 pandemic. By selecting Year 7 pupils, this also meant that their only possible prior knowledge of this topic would be from content covered in their Key Stage 2 learning in primary school or self-directed learning outside of the classroom. By using my own classes, the learners were already accustomed to my presence in their learning environment, which meant that their behaviour did not change, as could have been seen if I conducted my observation of learners who were unfamiliar with my presence in their classroom. It is important that research was conducted across classes of varying ability to ensure that the findings of the report are as applicable as possible to all learners and not focused on one particular attainment group. In order to establish a conclusive answer to research question 1, what different dimensions of change can learners explore when generating examples, it was important to provide learners with an opportunity to generate their own examples of a specific mathematical concept. The concept selected to encourage the learner-generated examples was adding fractions. In devising the research task, careful consideration had to be taken that there would be a disparity in learners' exposure to fractions. Therefore, a series of 4 examples of arithmetic with fractions were created that provided learners with a greater range of inspiration and also a greater choice of possible dimensions of variation. These can be seen on the slide. As research question 1 looks at the nature of dimension changes, it was paramount that a variety of dimensions were included in each of the examples displayed. Therefore, a variety of numerators and denominators, improper fractions, and mixed numbers were featured. An example of subtraction in example 3 and addition in the other examples illustrates the use of different operations with fractions. Equivalence and inequalities, which learners have previously learned this year, were shown, as were solutions to the examples, with example 3 contrasting with example 4, as it had yet not been simplified. Through the inclusion of all these dimensions, I'd hope to ensure that all learners had the same exposure within the limits of the study. It was made clear to all learners that every example was correct and subsequently showed that there were a range of dimensions that could be included in fraction arithmetic. After displaying the examples on the slides to learners, they were then asked to create their own versions, altering anything they wished about each example. This was to be done individually, to ensure that learners could not be influenced by their peers' decisions. In the examples, there is a change in the text colour from green to black. This separates the solution, black, from the question that had been proposed, green. This deliberate formatting choice prompted the exploration of the idea that it is the learner's choice to include a solution or just a question in their own versions. The nature and frequency of such changes were analysed, and the following 8-dimensional changes were most notable. A learner was considered to have made these dimensional changes if there was any evidence in any of their 4 learner-generated examples, and each learner's response was coded as either a yes or a no to the evidence above, and a frequency table would be created to help answer research question 1. In order to better understand the relationship between different natures of dimensional change, and how they have that with their learning outcomes to answer research question 2, how does what learner varies relate to their learning outcome, a wider comparison by which to categorise was developed. By introducing the notion of classifying by either numerical or non-numerical change to any of the examples, this was possible. They're tabulated on the slide you can see there. This classification enables a determination to be made whether a numerical change resulted in a more successful outcome, or equally, a less successful. Learners completed an assessment and a mean and standard deviation for the percentage scored by learners that fell into either of these groups was established. It was clear that it was possible for a learner to have made a combination of these changes, and therefore the statistics were calculated for those who had made only numerical, only non-numerical, and a combination of both of these dimensional changes. This supports a conclusion to be drawn as to whether a learner could have a more successful outcome if these dimensional changes had been seen in their generated examples. There can be very clear implications of this research and practice. If any particular dimensional change is seen to have a significant positive relationship with learning outcomes, then it would be encouraged for this dimensional change to be seen frequently in teacher examples. It would also be invaluable in ensuring that teachers provide opportunities for learners to generate examples in lessons, to uncover what dimensional changes within a topic can have influence on a learner's concept image and ultimately their learning outcome. This is true for all subjects and phases. There is a need for triangulation of research, data, and experience for learners, and so we must consider the learner's perspectives before any changes are made to our teaching practice. To establish a better understanding of learner perspectives, a questionnaire for all of the participants was also devised. Considering the findings on the slide, there appears to be a positive relationship between the number of dimensional changes and the mean percentage test score. This alludes to the idea that the more dimensional changes the learner can make, the better comprehension they have of the topic of fractions, as they achieve a higher percentage test score on average. It was also found that learners who attempted to solve achieved better outcomes than those who did not in their generated examples, and that every nature of change observed illustrated a more successful outcome for the learner. Learners who were able to make a combination of both numerical and non-numerical changes had better outcomes than those who had made exclusively one nature of change. The summary of findings associated with research question 3 are listed here and have a clear focus on learner perspective and experience. Learners should be provided with the opportunities to become more confident with generating their own examples. Learners felt empowered in being trusted to lead the task. And learners were aware of the purpose of the task, and it did not feel controlled by the teacher. When concluding, it was found that providing learners with opportunities to generate their own examples and ensuring that it is explicitly explained that there is no marking criterion of these examples, we have the potential to increase confidence in a topic and encourage exploration of concepts. Practitioners should ensure that learners are exposed to a range of examples that feature different dimensional changes to familiarise learners with how questions can be formed in a variety of ways. And as a result of this research, I will incorporate more opportunities for learners to generate their own examples, and for these to feature as examples that I model within my lessons. I aim to ensure that when modelling example, these feature a vast range of dimensional changes to ensure that learners are exposed to these before they're expected to answer questions that may include previously unseen dimensions. And in addition to this investigation has highlighted the importance of the inclusion of activities within lessons that have no marking criterion but promote learning and resilience. I would encourage you to consider these points when you're next planning a lesson, so that we can continue to ensure that student outcomes improve through positive measures, such as involving them in leadership, giving them additional responsibilities, and promoting good role models within our lessons. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, please contact me.
Thank you, Courtney, for that really thought-provoking presentation. Colleagues, if you have any questions or you would like to delve deeper into Courtney's research, please do contact him. I know that he would love to have any follow-up conversations. If anybody has watched this today and thought they would like to do what Courtney has, whether live, streamed or recorded, please do get in touch with Megan Webb using the email link on screen. I hope that colleagues will consider this because there is some absolutely fantastic practice across our organisation that does challenge our thinking and does enable us to serve our learners better. Thank you ever so much for listening today and wishing you all very well for the half term.